I love video games, and today in this list you'll see my top 100. I only have one rule for this list, one game from each series. I wanted to make things interesting by not having the same series over and over, so each series can only have one place on this list. Additionally, the ordering isn't too precise. On a different day, a lot of them might have been in slightly different places, so if that is important to you, just rearrange them in your head. Gaming is a wonderful and beautiful thing. It's my favourite hobby, and this list is my way of celebrating it. These electronic masterpieces reflect the years of dedication and passion that the developers have put into them, all for our amusement. Gaming is a way for us to express ourselves, to unwind and relax, experience epic stories and cut free from the world. It's something special, and if your favourite doesn't appear in this list, that doesn't mean it doesn't have merit. These are just my picks. So, let's get started with my top 100 greatest video games of all time. It's good to be bad. Dungeon Keeper 2 is a dungeon management simulator in which you manage the growth of an evil lair, building rooms, mining, expanding and taking out the good guys. Management simulators have become a familiar genre, but back in 1999 DK2 was paving the way by putting the focus firmly on fun rather than serious realism, and it's something that made it stand the test of time.
Mission 1, start!
The Metal Slug series is revered amongst gamers for being one of the best run and gun style shooters of all, and Metal Slug 3 is the absolute best. It's got extremely tight gameplay, expressive animations and beautiful art, and that adds up to create an extremely exciting and action-packed arcade experience. It's not always received the best home ports, but in recent years access has become easier than ever, and it holds its own against any modern opponent.
What the? Any chance of a hand?
Time Splitters is a series which perhaps never quite managed to get the recognition it deserved. It was a series that had extremely fun first-person shooting gameplay, characterised by over-the-top silliness and huge amounts of content, not to mention a focus on multiplayer, with a plethora of modes and customizability that would make any modern shooter pale in comparison. Both 2 and 3 are very fun, but for me, I always preferred the slightly more epic story of 3. Either way, these games show a path of first-person shooters marked by fun rather than grit and realism, which sadly the industry did not walk. Who knows, maybe one day we will finally get that sequel. I love grand strategy games, and Valkyria II is one of the grandest. Taking place in the 19th century, Valkyria II tasks players with running a country and growing an empire, building industry, trade and armies as players chart the course of their nation for a century. The game can be played in any manner, be that by becoming a peaceful democracy offering progression and liberalisation, or by becoming an autocratic empire colonising the known world. It's this unlimited sense of possibility which kept players coming back for more and more over the years, and even though Valkyria 3 has since been released, in my heart, Valkyria 2 holds supreme.
Over the hood, through the streets, and right into your brain. We're transmitting our signal straight to you. Y'all got your antennas on or what? Yeah, we're riding high in a smooth stream of supersonic sound. And I'm your captain and DJ, Professor K. Jet Set Radio!
Amazing soundtrack? Check. Stylized graphics that only get better with age? Check. Fun, rollerblading based gameplay, taking place around an over-the-top version of Tokyo? Of course. Jet Set Radio is one of those games that when you play, you don't forget. Taking charge of graffiti-loving bladers ripping up the city by performing tricks and antics just simply never gets old, and that music will absolutely never leave your head. Hum the bass line. In Onamusha II, you play as Jubei Yagyu, a wandering samurai that finds his village under attack by demons. Jubei takes up the sword and vows revenge against the armies of darkness led by Nobunaga Oda. Onamusha merges tank-based controls with precision-based action, and it just completely works. It features beautiful pre-rendered graphics with well-crafted levels and worlds, interesting characters, and of course, plenty of secrets and puzzles. Onamusha II is just one of those games that feels rewarding when you finished it, and it's one that any gamer should play. Building a city is fun. Running a city, that's what becomes addictive. The SimCity series was really the first to properly capture this idea, and SimCity 4 was the pinnacle. It managed to truly do everything you could want in a city planning game, with enough content to keep you coming back for more. Abes Odyssey is a strange game. You play as Abe, a Mudokon slave being forced to work in a meat processing factory that is actually trying to process his fellow slaves. Abe embarks on a quest to save his people, solving puzzles and platforming along the way. It's an engrossing story, with a really great art direction and a dark sense of humour, and it's quite challenging too. The unique gameplay and setting make this game stand out and stick in the mind of those who played it. Panzer Dragoon Auto stands atop the rail shooter genre as one of the greatest examples of it, featuring beautiful scenery, intense combat, and a fun, epic story. Rail shooters are intended to be a roller coaster, and Auto understands that perfectly, putting the player through level after level of expertly designed set pieces, utilising the hardware of the original Xbox to its extent. Smilebit crafted a title worthy of its place in history. Yakuza as a series is beloved by many, but perhaps misunderstood by more. It's a series in which you play as a member or former member of the Yakuza, usually in Tokyo, and usually revolving around Kazuma Kiryu. It's a third-person action-adventure in which you run around a city, beating up thugs, helping people out by doing missions, taking part in a load of side activities, and shopping, and generally getting stuck into whatever extra content each game sets to offer. Yakuza Zero is the 6th game in the series, and acts as a prequel, expanding the story from the later games, whilst also offering plenty to do. It's a game that you really just have to experience, with years of effort spent perfecting a formula coming to fruition. Garou Mark of the Wolves is a legendary fighting game for the Neo Geo, produced by SNK in 1999 as a follow-up to their Fatal Fury series. It's simply an outstanding entry into the 2D fighting game genre, featuring beautiful graphics and animation, a deep combat system, and a fresh cast of characters. Secret of Monkey Island was released in 1990 and featured the point-and-click adventures of Guybrush Threepwood as he tried to become a pirate. For those that played it, they stumbled upon a game that can only be described as a comedy adventure, providing huge entertainment through its fun cast of characters, humorous storyline, and pirate reggae soundtrack. It expanded and improved on all of the tropes of previous point-and-click adventures, crafting something entirely unique. Gamers that played it became enthralled, and it's not one people easily forget. Warhammer 40k, the miniature war game set in a war-torn future, was begging for a game which could reproduce the carnage and scale of combat, and Dawn of War was the first which truly did it. Not only did it allow players to engage in all-out tactical battles on scarred alien worlds, but it did so whilst providing a genuinely challenging real-time strategy title with really great graphics and animations for the time, and a huge amount of content when it's combined with all its various expansions. Radiant Silvergun is a 1998 shoot 'em up created by Treasure, originally released in the arcade and later ported over to the Sega Saturn. In the late 90s, the shoot 'em up genre was flagging, having been pushed aside by the more popular fighting games that come to own the arcade. Silvergun absolutely reinvigorated the genre, showing that shoot 'em ups could still be something amazing. It gave arcade goers a deep system filled with hidden bonuses and a steep challenge, gorgeous visuals, and expertly crafted gameplay. Katamari Damacy reminds us that gaming can just be fun and a little mad. In this game, the king of all cosmos has destroyed all the stars, moons and celestial bodies in the sky, and it is up to his son, the prince, to try and solve this. To do this, the prince pushes around the Katamari, a sticky ball that rolls up anything in its path and slowly goes bigger and bigger, up until the size needed for that particular star. The game has a very fun and quintessentially Japanese sense of style, with an extremely varied soundtrack, and it's just one of those games that you just can't stop smiling when you play it. It's an instant mood lifter, and that's what makes it an absolute classic. The Virtua Fighter series was originally seen as more of a showcase of 3D graphics than a serious fighting game. It was meant to show what Sega could do. Each entry in the series evolved this and moved the series down a path of slow but methodical and precise fighting gameplay. By the fourth, it had developed into one of the deepest 3D fighting games of all time, with a system that is tough but very rewarding to master. Not only that, it is extremely polished and balanced, and therefore never feels cheap, but always a true matchup. Soul Calibur 3 is the definition of what happens when you design a fighting game for a home console. It took the polished and fun weapon-based combat of Soul Calibur 2 and supercharged it with a huge amount of content, creating a character, a strategy mode, stories for every main character that feature multiple paths and unlockables, missions, tournaments, unlockable costumes and weapons. The list goes on and on. But at its core, Soul Calibur 3 is the pinnacle of what the series is known for: precise and frantic combat set against gorgeous scenery with excellent soundtracks. Soul Calibur 3 is perhaps a little underappreciated because it released towards the tail end of the PS2's life cycle and didn't feature online play or get a port to another system, but for those that played the game, the legend will never die. Channeling older titles like Total Annihilation, Supreme Commander takes the concept of real-time strategy and adds scale, humongous scale, to the battles. Featuring gigantic maps with loads of units, some epic and gigantic machines, as well as frantic and fun combat, it's an RTS that just works. Whilst it was difficult to run on PCs back in the day, modern machines can power through it and give the game the showcase it deserves. Valkyria Chronicles is a turn-based RPG in which you control a squad of conscripted soldiers brought into service due to their fictional country being invaded by a large empire. Chronicles features beautiful watercolour aesthetic, reflecting the fact that it's supposed to be a bunch of regular people thrust into a battle, and combines it with a sweet yet sweeping musical score. Key to Valkyria Chronicles' success is the intrinsic link between the gameplay and story. It is possible to lose members of your squad for good if they die on the battlefield, and that goes hand in hand with the game's key themes of loss and fighting for what you believe in. It really is one of the most engaging RPGs ever. As one of the most popular fictional characters of all time, Batman has a long history with video games. These games, and the superhero genre in general, reached their zenith with Arkham Knight. Knight features an incredibly dense world, in which every building and area feels unique and handcrafted, giving the game an absolutely timeless style in which every screenshot feels like a painting. The game utilises this world to tell the story of an older Batman facing off against his rivals whilst also facing his internal demons, and combines this with extremely fun combat mechanics that mix stealth and action perfectly. It's this combination of story, gameplay and world design which meant that Arkham Knight deserves its place on this list.
And
Kingdom Hearts is a series that combines characters from Disney's movies and Final Fantasy to create an action RPG mashup for the ages. Many players love the series, with Kingdom Hearts 2 in particular being held up as the best in the franchise. The game utilises all these various characters to craft a story that is both epic and touching, combining this with some beautiful music and stylised graphics. Devil May Cry is cool, and Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition is the coolest. The Devil May Cry series was founded on stylish action, letting the player unleash bonkers combos on legions of demons, and the series really perfected this gameplay by the 3rd edition. DMC3 manages to solve one of the series' weakest parts up until now, which was the story, elevating it to levels which put it on par with other narrative greats. DMC3 is simply so fun to play, with the hack and slash action being so engaging that it's impossible to put down. It's simply a masterclass in action. Releasing in 1997, Cave's arcade classic set a new standard for bullet hell vertical shooters. Dodonpachi features super intense and frantic gameplay, excellent graphics and animations, controls super well, and ultimately is just really fun. When Sonic the Hedgehog was introduced, he became a pop culture icon to the extent that Sega adopted the Blue Blur as their company's official mascot and tried to rest the future of their gaming hopes on his shoulders. They knew that they had to make sure the sequel was a hit, and a hit it was. Sonic 2 for the Sega Mega Drive so that a character based on speed would have levels that could be raced through while still providing adequate challenge. That challenge is perfectly right, with the game excellently balancing the difficulty and the fun. In addition, the graphics are simply timeless. The colourful visuals and wonderful pixel art express a world which is simply iconic. To add to all of this is an extremely catchy soundtrack which perfectly utilises the target hardware. Sonic 2 simply works. Ghost of Tsushima is simply one of the most beautiful games ever rendered. Set in 1274, a Mongol fleet invades the island of Tsushima and a huge battle erupts with the local samurai. You play as Jin Sakai, one of the few survivors of the battle, as you fight to take back the island from the invaders. The game does not shy away from the brutality of war, featuring visceral and precise combat, but the island of Tsushima itself is the true star. It's simply unbelievable to look at, with each frame being a work of art, and the updated PS5 version showcasing the game in all its glory. It's an action adventure that perhaps doesn't revolutionise the genre, but throws everything at it. Shenmue is a series which is difficult to explain to non-fans. You play as Ryu Hazuki, a teenage martial artist, as he tries to unravel the circumstances surrounding his father's death and attain some justice. The game featured an open world with day and night systems, daily schedules which involve jobs and other activities, random events and quests around the city, and lots more. It's more of an experience, and it pushed the Dreamcast to its absolute limits. There is something about Shenmue 2 that just feels alive. There are plenty of open world video games, but to have one that feels living and breathing is very difficult, but Shenmue 2 has it, and it's the reason why it touched so many gamers' hearts. Turn-based tactics games have a rich history, but they reached their zenith with XCOM 2. Featuring incredibly addictive squad strategy, combined with a base building simulator, it is an absolute must-have. XCOM 2 is about a group of soldiers trying to rid the world of the alien occupiers, and whilst many games have similar stories, few manage to capture the urgency and desperation such a situation would realistically contain. XCOM 2 constantly puts players on the brink of destruction, mirroring the circumstances, and has real in-game consequences. It's a game in which victory is euphoric and death is catastrophic, and this combined with its supreme gameplay means it deserves its place in history. If you combine an incredible soundtrack, beautifully detailed graphics, and a superb control and combat system, you get Super Castlevania 4. Action platformers are 10 a penny, but Super Castlevania 4 succeeds because it is so focused. You feel real progression fighting through the castle, with the goal simply being to push forward. The castle throws everything against you, but the tight and precise controls give you the feeling that it is really in your power to fight back, not just up to the game. The difficulty curve is spot on. There is simply nothing but extremely fun action platforming.
Would you be interested in a trade agreement with England?
4X. Explore, expand, exploit, exterminate. These are the tenets which define the genre, and no game exemplifies them better than Civilization V. You pick a leader and civilization from the annals of history and are charged with leading your new country into the world, from the prehistoric age all the way to the future. Along with its expansions, Civ 5 perfects the genre, allowing for simply endless amounts of gameplay that fit any player's style. Want to turtle and build up a few cities? You can do it. Want to focus on tourism and being peaceful? Of course. Want to go full steam ahead and build up huge armies and conquer the earth? Go for it. The freedom in Civ 5 is what makes it so special, and playing it multiplayer instead of against the AI creates some truly epic matchups that feel so grand in scope they could be historic. In 1996, developer Rising created one of the best vertical shmups of all time. Combining a techno score with gorgeous visuals, Gorega is a sight to behold. It utilises a complex scoring system which analyses players' actions to the T, and this creates a layer of depth that experts at shoot-em-ups crave. This system scales the difficulty level on the fly, meaning that the game is always challenging no matter how good or bad you are. It's a shooter for the hardcore and deserves its place on this list. War. Endless War. Taking place from 1936, Paradox's epic World War II simulator lets you take charge of any country that existed and guide them through one of the most turbulent times in human history. You can guide your country in any fashion you want, following their historical path or going your own way. The game combines politics and warfare to create a system which is always engaging, with every single game being different. You can customise your armies, tanks, planes, ships and divisions, focusing on areas that suit your nation depending on your resources. You can join a faction and follow its leader, or try and forge a unique path with your own faction. The scale of warfare can be truly outstanding, featuring hundreds, if not thousands of divisions from massive coalitions of nations. It is simply the definitive World War II simulator. A truly great game needs more than just good gameplay. It needs a memorable setting, and that is what defines BioShock. Set in the underwater city of Rapture, a place that rejected the ideologies of the nations of the surface, you play as Jack, the survivor of a plane crash, as he delves into this underwater city. Featuring an Art Deco style, the city of Rapture is simply unforgettable, and the story that proceeds within its chambers full of intrigue and dark, twisted imagery. The game utilises aspects of role-playing customisation to its first-person shooter system, but ultimately it's the world which defines BioShock, and it's one that players will not forget. Dragon Quest is more than a series of games, but a cornerstone of gaming culture. The series has defined much of what we now consider a JRPG, and continued to evolve it. It perhaps reached its greatest point with Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King, released in 2004 on the PS2. Dragon Quest VIII takes a simple plot but makes it epic through its focus on a few main characters, eschewing the trend of RPGs to have gigantic casts. It combines this with a light-hearted and funny script, excellent anime-styled graphics and a beautiful orchestral score to create an RPG that is both entertaining and engaging. It's just charming and fun. It proves that sometimes a great adventure doesn't need to have the world ending, it just needs to feel important. When Outrun was released in the arcades in 1986, it unintentionally changed the course of arcade races forever. Featuring bright, highly energetic graphics set against super fun music, it eschewed any idea of realism to focus on the feeling of driving fast. The feeling of having the wind in your hair, driving against the backdrop of beautiful scenery, with nothing to worry about and only good things on your mind. Games that are pure fun never go out of fashion. Quake was released in 1996 and redefined first-person shooters, a genre that had only been defined to start with a few years prior. The physics, graphics and sound effects may have been great for their time, but they was wrapped up in gameplay that just doesn't get old. Whether the graphics are old or new, blasting away monsters always feels great, and Quake just has a knack for making it feel good. Quake also set the scene with some truly creepy and unnerving sights, which give the player a reason to keep crusading through. Star Wars is a perfect vehicle for games, but they have often found it difficult to capture the essence of the series. Gamers wanted to not only feel like a Jedi, but feel like they was growing into one, and Jedi Knight II, Jedi Outcast captured that feeling. Playing as Kyle Katarn, players fought through a story of deception and treachery as they slowly recovered their powers, and they never felt so good. There is just something about lightsaber combat that this game got right, and that is even more evident in its multiplayer. If you played it at the time, you remember some of the most interesting and epic duels ever witnessed in gaming. Players would spend hundreds of hours honing their dueling skills, and the clans that arose around this game could be truly invested. They was invested because the underlying systems were so strong, simple but very difficult to master. They just work, and they still work, and Jedi Knight II stands the test of time. Fire Emblem Three Houses is the 16th entry in the Fire Emblem series, released in 2019 to the Nintendo Switch. Set on the continent of Fogland, players take the role of a new young teacher at a military academy for young officers from each of the continents of the Three Powers. You can pick which nation's students to teach, and along the way uncover a mystery that involves not only yourself, but the history of the world. What makes Three Houses truly engaging is the combination of its turn-based combat system and social simulation. You can freely wander around the monastery, making friends and solving quests, developing bonds and teaching your pupils. This means you become attached to them, as you not only increase their skills in combat, but guide their development as officers, picking their classes and specialisations. It makes the game more than the sum of its parts, and by the end, you truly care about the characters, and that is what makes it so special. Polyphony Digital has one job: create the ultimate driving simulator. In 2004, with the release of Gran Turismo 4, they arguably accomplished this. GT4, from start to finish, feels like a celebration of racing. The game goes to great lengths to accurately recreate the cars it features, from its looks, handling and sounds, and it does this to a lot of them, over 700 from all of automobile history. It wraps this up in an engaging career mode, in which the player purchases a cheap used car and through slowly winning races and tournaments can purchase better and faster cars, upgrade them and keep moving forward. It just does everything right. Who will be the king of Iron Fist Tournament? 3D fighting games are all the rage in the mid-90s, but few managed to really leave a mark. Tekken 3, with its interesting roster of characters, pumping soundtrack and responsive controls, left that mark. It managed to forge its own chapter in history by simply being a fantastic fighting game. Beat-em-ups were synonymous with the arcades in the 90s, and most were designed for that first and foremost. Sega broke the mould by designing one with consoles in mind, and that meant that Streets of Rage 2 was able to rise above many of its contemporaries to become a true classic. Every hit feels like a smash, and it utilises the graphics and sound capabilities of the Mega Drive to perfection, creating a grungy and crunchy experience that few can resist. Released in 2001 to the arcades, Ikaruga is perhaps the best vertical shooter ever released. Ikaruga stripped the genre back to its core, featuring no pickups or power-ups, only the player's standard attack and a homing laser. Players could build up their attack by absorbing enemy bullets by matching their ship to the colour of the bullets, building up huge power and chaining attacks. This unusual system caused some dissatisfaction on its original release, with gamers expecting a more traditional style, but over time it became a cult classic and is now truly regarded as one of the best games ever made, and rightly so. It's simply remarkable. Who could have predicted the success of Lemmings? Released in 1991 on the Amiga, Lemmings let the player take charge of a group of lemmings that were constantly marching forward, with the goal of the player to lead them to the exit. The player has a number of tools to do this, by giving certain lemmings orders, using obstacles, and more. It's a simple setup for a puzzle game, but it's so incredibly addictive, and the humorous touches keep it entertaining. It's just one of those games that everyone likes, and when they play it, they smile, and what more do you really need from a game? Dota 2 had an interesting inception. Starting life as Defense of the Ancients, a mode for Warcraft 3, Valve created a sequel based on that simple concept. It is a multiplayer online battle arena in which players take control of a character in a team of 5, with the concept being to destroy the other team's base. Every character has unique abilities and progression, and combining this with the myriad of items that can be purchased and combined creates an intricate system that is as deep as it is fun. The constant updates and new modes mean it has remained fresh ever since. Mass Effect 2 released in 2010 and is a single-player action RPG set in a huge universe that the player can actively change the course of. The player can determine their background and story, and through many different decisions, craft a unique story based on their own personal choices. The game tracks this morality through the course of the game, leading to many different outcomes. This interactive storytelling amongst the game's large cast of diverse and interesting characters led to a narrative that felt powerful, with real emotion, and the player felt as if they really had a place in this galaxy. This was enhanced by the clean graphics and atmosphere, and the squad-based combat system, which forced players to rely on their teammates. Players felt a deep connection to these characters, and ensuring the best outcome for them became an important mission, and since the players had the agency to make that happen, it made for an enthralling experience. The Ultima series helped establish the computer role-playing genre, and it reached its peak with Ultima VII, released in 1992. Featuring a huge interactive world which played out in real time, Ultima VII had a huge amount of depth and complexity. You play as the Avatar, return to the world of Britannia again. What makes Ultima VII so great is that apart from its compelling story, it's entirely non-linear, with a huge world to explore and many things and subquests to do within it, culminating in one of the best computer RPGs ever.
Oh, we've got this notion that we quite like to sail the ocean, so we're building a big boat to leave here for good. We're not keen on sinking, so we're all sitting here thinking, 'cause we built it too big and we've run out of wood. Idly, we simply can't leave till we get some more wood.
Black and white, yin and yang, good and evil. Have you ever wanted to be a god? This is the question that Black and White asks. Giving you the powers of a new god born into an ethereal landscape, you are charged with taking control of your people and guiding them through their destiny. You can be good and benevolent, or evil and destructive, both to your people and their enemies. You can complete quests or just mess around, not progressing and having fun in a sandbox world where you can do anything. Additionally, you get a creature, a loyal companion that through deep levels of learning can teach and grow in several different ways. There is just nothing else like it. It just has to be played. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes is a fighting game released in 2000 by Capcom, which took characters from both the Marvel and Capcom universe and pitted them against each other in an almighty struggle. This huge cast of characters gave the game so many different ways to be played and a depth that fighting fans relished. It featured a jazz-inspired soundtrack, which some people didn't like, but I personally love, and it's just one of the best fighting game experiences available. Total War is a series which combines grand strategy with tactical real-time battles to create the most engaging strategy experiences available, and the absolute best of these is Shogun II. Taking place in feudal Japan, you can pick a clan and attempt to become the shogun by unifying the country. You do this by building up armies, developing settlements, researching new technologies, hiring spies and diplomats, and using everything in your arsenal to expand and conquer. Shogun II manages to capture the feeling of warfare and the grisly realities of combat, not to mention the political intrigue of nation building, all wrapped up in an interface that attempts to set the scene of feudal Japan perfectly. It's just perhaps the best example of warfare at this kind of scale. Pokemon is one of the biggest media franchises of all time, but none of it would exist without the games, and those games at their core are just fun. You play as a kid leaving home, going on a journey to collect and train Pokemon. You can catch these Pokemon out in the wild, level them up and teach them new moves, and then battle them with other trainers. As you journey in the world, various stories uncover as you try and defeat each town's gym, and the world keeps opening up, slowly but surely. Pokemon Gold and Silver adds new mechanics, like having a mobile phone and being able to travel to other regions, but really the fun of these games is just in the core mechanics of catching and training Pokemon. It's just so fun and never gets old, and the fact that you could trade and battle with other people too only added to it. As a portable game and an RPG, it just has everything you could ever want. When Ico was released in 2001 on the PlayStation 2, it instantly became a cult hit. You play as a young boy that was inexplicably born with horns, which led to him being ostracised by his superstitious village. Locked away in an abandoned castle, Ico eventually finds Yorda, a young lady. Ico wants to save her, and together they try and escape, through solving puzzles, avoiding enemies, and light platforming. The game features beautiful art across grand scales, and primarily tells its story with very little dialogue, and the dialogue that does exist for Yorda is in a fictional language and untranslated, meant to represent the language gap between the characters. It's really a beautiful experience. In terms of JRPGs, by 1994 the tropes had been pretty well established, and most series followed them with minor variations. But Mother 2 completely eschewed them. The first game was different in its own way, but the sequel took it to a whole new level. Taking place in a modern setting, a kid decides to investigate a meteorite crash with his friends and dog. After that, explaining the story would take a very long time, but suffice to say, it is very non-traditional, featuring huge dollops of comedy and parody to its sci-fi meta setting. In addition to its esoteric story, the game featured a seamless world, huge cast of characters and NPCs, and a large amount of content. It's a game that dared to be different, and for that reason, staked its place in history. Hello, I hope you're enjoying the list so far. I just wanted to take a brief little intermission to say that this video is not sponsored, so if you want to help support me and this type of stuff, you can subscribe and like and all that normal things. And this video is almost certainly going to get demonetized because of all the random clips and music and stuff I've used. So if you want to go that one step further and help me a little bit more, I've recently opened a Patreon. Ooh, fancy. So there's some exclusive content and stuff over there, and it obviously just really helped me out if you decided to do it. So that's it, just wanted to plug myself for a second, and now we can get back to the list. Bye! For many people, Animal Crossing is more than a game, but a lifestyle, a comfort blanket. You take the role of a new villager landing on a deserted island. You are given the task of building a home and can progress the game in any method you choose. This can be from building up the village and getting new villagers to come and live there, collecting resources, decorating, dressing up, visiting other villages, and more. It's entirely non-linear, and as such is described as a life simulation game, since it executes everything in real time with a real day/night cycle. There is just so much content, it's hard to sum it up in this small amount of text, but the fact is, for the people that like this kind of game, there is simply nothing better. There had been many entries in the first-person shooter genre by the time Doom came out in 1993, and whilst they were all interesting, Doom was the first to really cause the genre to explode. You play as a space marine, fighting through hordes of demons in space and hell, using a variety of guns and weapons to slay these enemies. The reason that Doom is still so fun to play today is that it just gets the core mechanics right. Shooting and blowing up baddies still has just as much impact today as it did back then. Every weapon feels like it packs so much punch. Doom features a very minimal story, and although the levels can be large and feature secrets, it mainly focuses heavily on the action, which means that it is a constant thrill ride. It's an absolute adrenaline rush from start to finish. When Mega Man released in 1987, it was an interesting action platformer with a fun design. The follow-up in 1988 improved everything to the point of creating an almost perfect classic. Everything just works. You can take on levels in any order, gaining the weapons from the level's bosses, which can then be used against other ones as power-ups. This gives the game a replayability, as there are several different paths to completion. The audio and graphics are simply superb, with the music in particular being absolutely iconic. The game is challenging but not brutally so, hitting just the right level of difficulty as it rarely feels unfair. Mega Man 2 is just brilliant. When Pong was released in 1972, it pretty much kick-started the video game industry. Now you may think that I'm putting this game on the list just for historical reasons, but that isn't true. If you pick up a Pong machine today and play it, it's still fun. It's just a perfect two-player game. All there is a paddle and a ball, nothing else. It strips back competition to its absolute core. There are no frills, no fancy mechanics, no tricks or tips. You just play against each other in a constant serve and volley. When looking for a game to challenge someone one-on-one to prove who is the better gamer, there is nothing better. Little Big Planet offered gamers the opportunity to customise their platforming experience by creating and sharing levels, and Little Big Planet 2 took that concept and rolled with it, infusing the game with a huge amount of content. The game features a huge amount of charm, featuring a world that is literally crafted together, and whilst the levels offered by the developers are fun, the true enjoyment was always in what the community created. The seemingly endless amounts of creativity meant that there was always something surprising and new to play, all wrapped up in such a cute and friendly package. Klonoa 2 is a platform sequel released in 2001 on the PlayStation 2. You play as Klonoa, pulled into the world of Lunatea to help solve their woes. You travel with companions Lolo and Popka, who help power your ring. Your ring can capture enemies, which you can then use to throw against other enemies and obstacles, or as a way to jump higher. Klonoa manages to mix really tight controls, wonderful settings, a decent level of challenge, and a beautiful presentation to create a game that is more than the sum of its parts. When Shadow of the Colossus released in 2005, it revolutionised how games could be presented. Featuring a wide, minimalist world that still carries a weight to its narrative, Colossus allowed players plenty of time to reflect between the sparse action. The central progression of the game is to seek out a Colossus, defeat them, and then return to the central shrine before venturing out and finding the next one. It's that over and over. These huge battles with the Colossus are intense and exciting, but the game forces you to consider whether or not these are really enemies and you should be doing this, and it never provides a straightforward answer. SNK released The Last Blade 2 in 1998 onto its Neo Geo arcade system, and with it crafted one of the absolute best weapon-based 2D fighters ever. The detailed and well animated art and backgrounds are one thing, but it's the core gameplay that makes it so good. There is depth to each of the characters, and more than that, real impact. The weapons feel like they are dangerous and have heft, and have to be used precisely. Button mashing simply won't work. The combat, characters and mechanics all just work, and there is just nothing to detract from it or the experience. Tennis as a sport is perfect for a gaming conversion, and it's never been done better than Virtua Tennis 2. Featuring a focus on what makes the sport fun rather than pure realism, Virtua Tennis 2 gives a tennis experience that just never gets old. You can create your own character and venture out into the world in a career mode, increasing skills via a series of fun minigames, entering tournaments to win prize money, and keep progressing. Whilst that career mode is fun, there's just no getting away from the fact that the basic experience of having a match just works so well. In Soul Reaver, you play as Raziel, a former vampire turned into a ghostly disfigured spectre, seeking to take your revenge hundreds of years after your untimely death at the hands of Cain. You venture between the material and spectral realms as you explore a dark and twisted world, killing vampires and other creatures with quite grisly results. As an action adventure, there are puzzles to solve, battles to overcome, skills to gain, and a story to unravel. It's really the oppressive atmosphere of the world that makes Soul Reaver so unique. It stands alone with its dark and depressing story about a catastrophic world in ruin, with seemingly no hope of recovery. It's an ambitious game that achieves a lot, and its grim setting sets it apart. Dead or Alive 2 released in the year 2000 and showed the world what 3D fighters could be. Featuring excellent graphics and backgrounds, really good animations and physics, and a sweet soundtrack, the presentation was simply flawless. However, the main attraction of a fighting game is the fighting, and DOA 2 just excels. Every hit feels like a sledgehammer, featuring so much impact that you feel it yourself. There are huge amounts of combos for each character, and the simple but difficult to master countering system creates matchups that can turn around instantly if the player manages a good reversal. More than this, it's just enjoyable to play. Because it's so intuitive, anyone can pick up a controller or get on an arcade machine and have a go, and they will have a good time doing so. Allowing players to be knocked off of the maps into other areas, it does everything you could ever want from a 3D fighting game. Dragon Age is a third-person RPG released in 2009 and developed by BioWare. Taking place in a fictional fantasy world, you play as a custom character from several different backgrounds, eventually recruited into the Grey Wardens, an order that stands against a demonic force known as the Darkspawn, which threatens to overcome and destroy their land. You have to journey through this world, making friends and enemies, completing quests, and growing in power, in order to try and stop this incoming invasion. Players have agency in the decisions they make, which affect the game's story and their relationships between companions. Thanks to recent fan-made patches, the game finally managed to reach all of its original promise, having a truly epic RPG adventure in which you really can forge your own destiny. In 2010, we would get Fallout New Vegas from Obsidian Entertainment. Originally pitched as a spin-off of Fallout 3, New Vegas managed to surpass its origins to become the best game in the series. You play as the courier, transporting a mysterious package across the Mojave Desert when you are jumped. After recovering, you are put straight back into the post-apocalyptic wasteland with a mission to recover the package and uncover its mysteries. Through the story, you can choose your own path, becoming involved with one of the many warring factions in New Vegas, ultimately deciding to help or hinder them to change the state of the world. The combat too is great, featuring loads of different options, from guns to melee, and allowing the player to expand in whichever direction they choose. Thanks to patches and updates made over time, which resolved the game's original technical issues, it now stands as one of the greatest RPGs ever made. Grand strategy games usually focus on managing a country or nation, but Crusader Kings instead puts the focus on managing a family. You play as a character in the medieval world and have simply infinite options. You can start as a count and attempt to build your way up to becoming a duke, king or emperor, or sit back and just manage your small fiefdom whilst your feudal overlords do all the heavy lifting, growing rich in the process. You can micromanage your relationships, organise strategic marriages, have affairs, become a witch, go crusading, become a demon worshipper, have hundreds of kids. The options are all there, and when you die, you play as your elected heir. The options open are bewildering, and it makes every single game truly unique and open-ended. You can never predict what will happen. It makes the world feel alive. You don't feel as if you're playing with a bunch of predictable AI, but really carving out your name in a medieval world. It's epic and it's intriguing, and it's just completely fun. Released in 2005 for the original Xbox, Ninja Gaiden Black perfected the hack and slash genre by expanding upon the release a year earlier of Ninja Gaiden. You play as Ryu Hayabusa, a ninja, as he battles through a bunch of other clans. Featuring bloody combat with a ridiculous amount of gore, visceral battles and an exciting level of challenge, Ninja Gaiden Black was a spectacle. The game didn't hold the player's hands, and this is one of the reasons that it feels so good whenever you manage to beat a level. You really feel like you've beaten it. It's action at its purest. Combining two different genres is never easy, but when it's done right, it can lead to some brilliant results. Released in 1990, ActRaiser combined city building with 2D action platforming and light RPG elements to create a game which was truly special. You took the role of a god, trying to save a world on the brink of destruction. You do this by commanding your angel to defend and grow towns, listen to the needs of the town people and perform miracles. Then, when the time calls, you take the place of an animated statue and battle the monsters directly, before defeating the big boss in the area, returning that part of the world to peace. As you play the game and view it from the overworld, you can slowly see the world starting to come back to life, giving a real reward to the adventure. This is all without mentioning the excellent graphics and music that permeate the presentation. ActRaiser is an example of a game that took a risk, and that risk paid off. Mario Kart as a series is absolutely beloved, and with the revised release of its 8th instalment, it just had everything that fans could want. In the game, you pick a Nintendo character and a course and go for a race around a number of awesome different tracks, both on land, in the air and underwater. You pick up items to battle each other with, and this combination of fun tracks and crazy items are what keeps the races exciting. It's one of the best multiplayer games of all time, in particular because it offers enough accessibility options that everyone can play comfortably, with the game bending to any skill level. Mario Kart is just pure fun. When The Sims was released in the year 2000, it was something of an experiment. Would gamers enjoy playing a game with no fixed goals, purely a life simulator with building tools? It turns out they would, and in fact, they loved it. With Sims 2, they took everything that worked well in the first game and improved upon the things that didn't to create the definitive Sims experience. The Sims 2 celebrates the beauty of daily activities, giving credence to seemingly boring and mundane activities, and guiding your Sims through their lives just felt so endearing. Along with its expansions, The Sims 2 crafted the definitive life simulator experience. Unreal Tournament 2004 is one of the definitive multiplayer experiences. Featuring fun and fast-paced first-person shooting gameplay, gamers just got addicted to it, and the core mechanics are so fun that it still holds up. It's one of those games that's easy to pick up but impossible to put down, with matches feeling so intense and challenging, yet adrenaline pumping at the same time. It's an explosive, fast-paced action multiplayer game that ticks all the boxes. Age of Empires 2, released originally in 1999, was a genre-defining real-time strategy game. You took charge of a nation and starting with a few villagers, slowly built out a base, organised resource gathering, built an army, built a bigger base, researched new technologies, progressed through the ages, and of course, went out conquering. This simple cycle just works and provides an extremely rich strategy experience. The multitude of different maps and civilizations available meant there was plenty of content, and because the gameplay is so rewarding, the lifespan of the game endured, with new expansions being released even to this day. It's just the definitive real-time strategy experience. Released in 1995, Chrono Trigger is an RPG game for the Super Nintendo in which you play as a group of young adults accidentally transported back in time. This kicks off an adventure across the ages where you ultimately end up facing down an evil monster in one of 12 different endings, depending on the way you play the game and the quests that have been done along the way. The music, graphics and characters of Chrono Trigger are both special and timeless, giving gamers a truly enchanting RPG experience. Whilst it is not the most complex RPG ever created, it doesn't need to be, since it nails the basic mechanics of what make an RPG like this fun. The story and adventure feels epic, the characterisation feels deep, and perhaps above all, it just sucks you in. In Portal 2, you play as Shell, woken up from a stasis chamber into a dilapidated Aperture science facility. You meet Wheatley, a small robot who tries to help you escape from the facility. Unfortunately, you are interrupted by GLaDOS, who starts rebuilding the facility and subjecting you to new experiments. As the first game, your main tool to solve the experiments is the titular portal gun. With this, you can create two portals that connect to each other, and through this very simple idea, a massive amount of possibilities and puzzle solving occurs. Each puzzle is increasingly more complex, and together with the game's humorous narrative and excellent atmosphere, really feels fun. Portal 2 exemplifies that if you have a really good mechanic, you don't need anything else, and you can just build upon that to craft something special. Eat all the pellets. Pac-Man is a very simple game. You guide Pac-Man around a maze, eating the pellets and avoiding the ghosts. That is, until you pick up a power-up which lets you eat the ghosts, collect all the pellets, and move on to the next screen. Rinse and repeat. For a single screen arcade game, it's basically perfect. It requires no explanation, it's obvious from the moment you touch the joystick what the objective is. It's simple, yet challenging, and it is addictive. What more could you want from a game? Racing games often have a difficult time with the concept of crashing. They sometimes go to great lengths to not glamorise unsafe driving, and want to portray racing as a respectable sport. Burnout goes in the other direction, and just lets players smash and crash everything to their heart's content. Burnout 3 was the zenith of this attitude, letting players crash and burn their way through different modes across a World Tour mode, which included more standard arcade racing, as well as others which focused more on the destruction element. For whatever reason, people just love smashing things up, and Burnout 3 does it best. Sometimes it's hard to think of Minecraft as a game. People tend to think more of the community that surrounds the game, of the various content creators that play it, and of its place in culture. But strip all of that away and you're left with a game that is popular for a reason. Giving players the opportunity to explore, build and survive in a procedurally generated world is always fun, and the creativity that can stem from it is really interesting. Taking RPGs to new heights was the definitive edition of Divinity II, released in 2018. Whilst the original version and the previous entry in the series were always great games, it's with this definitive edition that everything just came together perfectly. Players are thrust into the world as an alleged sorcerer, an individual that is able to wield source magic, which is believed to be awakening the Voidwoken, interdimensional creatures that will destroy the world. You are given free rein to create your character and their class, and are then taken onto the story. It's not an RPG with a big open world where you're free to do anything. Whilst it is filled with different quests and secrets, there's very much a narrative to follow. But this narrative is so engaging and so fun, and the companion story is so interesting, that it just keeps moving forward effortlessly. This is all enhanced by one of the most fun and interesting combat systems in RPG history, which manages to utilise turn-based combat in a way that's just endlessly fun. There are so many variables to combat, with players being able to interact with the world and its objects whilst fighting, leading to so many combinations and options. It's just simply one of the pinnacles of RPG history. Jump over the barrels, climb the ladders, save the girl, simple. You play as Jumpman, trying to save Pauline from a big gorilla, and your tools involve jumping and occasionally hammers. It's a very simple game, but the precise controls and clear objective just make it so much fun. Anyone that visits an arcade and sees this machine has to play it, and the reason for that is because it's just good. Simplicity sometimes works. Smash Bros. Ultimate is simply a dream for fighting game fans. Taking the series to unparalleled heights, it is absolutely stuffed to the brim with content. Ultimate refines the series' fighting mechanics to their best feeling yet, and makes each character of the huge cast feel properly unique, with depth hinted at the more you play. In terms of competitive fighting games, there just is nothing better to play with friends, with the amount of carnage being possible in a Smash Bros. Game, creating huge amounts of enjoyment. Games have always been compared to movies in one way or another, but none have felt so much like a big summer blockbuster as does the Uncharted series. Uncharted 4 took the series' action-adventure gameplay and infused it with a heavy dose of emotion and story. You play as Nathan Drake, exploring the world and hunting down historical relics, fighting bad guys and scaling huge structures and mountains. It's just an absolute thrill ride from start to finish, a roller coaster of an experience, compounded by some of the best graphics and music ever presented to gamers. A remarkable achievement in game development. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is a skateboarding game released in 2000 in which you play as a professional skateboarder across a range of modes. There are various objectives to complete which are different depending on the stage and involve various things such as scoring a huge amount of points doing tricks, collecting things and other arbitrary challenges. You can even create your own levels and play with friends. In terms of sports gaming, Tony Hawk's 2 reigns supreme. It's just so cool to be able to pull off crazy tricks and stunts whilst going really fast. Each of the levels is so varied and focuses on nothing but fun, and not to mention the controls are simple enough for anyone to understand and feel like a pro skater. It's just so great. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, released in 2011, gives players one of the most vast and open worlds ever presented, and it is an absolute dream. You play as the Dragonborn, and from there you are free to choose your adventure. You can follow the main story, do random quests, join factions or guilds, or just do nothing, apart from run around and steal stuff. It does a brilliant job of making you feel as if you are part of a real living world, instead of just playing a game, and that's what makes it so endearing. In keeping with the open nature, you can progress your character in any way you want, not set to a specific class system, with the skills improving as you use them. The scale of Skyrim is what makes it so special and so long lasting, with players still finding new things to this day.
It was our last wish.
God of War existed as an awesome series on PS2, featuring really fun hack and slash gameplay, but perhaps missing a heart. God of War in 2018 turned the franchise on its head, featuring an older Kratos, who now has a child, and has recently lost his wife. Set in a mythical version of Scandinavia, you travel with your son Atreus through various regions and different planes of existence, all based on Norse mythology, as you attempt to see your late wife's final request through. The story and world design are just top notch, and go much further than was ever needed for a game like this. Kratos is older and slower, but hits just as hard, with combat feeling extremely impactful and visceral. It combines a deep, well-written and emotional story with genuinely great combat and exploration to create one of the best gaming experiences of all time. Finish the fight. This was the promise of Halo 3, and it really felt like that. Continuing the story from the first two games, you played as Master Chief in his final effort to finish the war, featuring new enemies and old allies. The game from start to finish felt like an epic conclusion, a real ending to a galactic war, and it's this sense of progression and finality which made every mission feel really important. The classic fast and precise Halo gameplay was still present, with the multiplayer being as good as ever. Despite some of the later games somewhat weakening the conclusion, as a trilogy, the first 3 Halo games tell one of the best war stories in all of gaming. Mortal Kombat originally made a name for itself with its digitised graphics and dark atmosphere, but with its sequel it managed to truly make its name as a fighting game. The digitised graphics were cleaner, the backgrounds more interesting and the atmosphere darker, but what really made the game compelling was the core fighting. MK2 gave the players more freedom in linking together combos, mixing in special moves was much easier and each character became slightly more balanced. All of this added together to create one of the most fun and easy to pick up and play fighting games ever. In 2004, Valve released Half-Life 2 to instant critical acclaim. Half-Life 2 integrated physics directly into its gameplay with the gravity gun and continued the adventures of its silent protagonist. It managed to create an engaging narrative and compelling world with very little fat. Everything was direct and to the point, but this allowed the game to have a properly crafted experience that was great from beginning to end. Gamers aren't blasted with hundreds of hours of dialogue and backstory, but instead given just enough information, just enough story to keep things fresh, but also leave room for imagination and theory. There's just something special about Half-Life 2, and it has remained that way. Reigning above all other fighters is the original classic Street Fighter II, and in particular the best of all the variations, Street Fighter II Turbo. What makes Street Fighter II so special is its characters. Everyone has their favourite, and that's because they all feel unique with their own story. Of course, Ryu and Ken share a similar moveset, but that doesn't stop people having their firm favourites. Adding to this, the special moves, which were relatively easy to execute, as well as the simple combo system, made a game which felt simple to understand on the surface, with many hidden layers. The bright and colourful graphics and awesome music only added to the experience, and ultimately, all of this together is why Street Fighter II Turbo is the best fighting game of all time. When CD Projekt Red released The Witcher 3 in 2015, they surprised the world. The previous 2 games in the series had been decent action RPGs, but had their limitations. Witcher 3 came out and blew everything else out of the water. In The Witcher 3, you play as Geralt of Rivia, a Witcher, as he travels across the land searching for Ciri, his adopted daughter. Along the way, you take on the role of a Witcher, defeating monsters, doing quests, and inadvertently getting involved in much larger plots and conspiracies. They nailed the combat system, with it really emulating the fast and fluid combat style that Witchers are supposed to have, all backed up by varying schools of magical signs. Exploring the world is great because it feels so lived in, can feel genuinely war-torn and hopeless, and for lack of a better word, real. Combining this world with the excellent story, dialogue and characters results in an RPG with practically no flaws. Resident Evil is the premier zombie-killing franchise in gaming, and with Resident Evil 4, everything finally came together perfectly. You play as Leon S. Kennedy, sent on a mission to rescue the president's daughter, captured by a weird cult. These cultists are being controlled by parasites, and along the way, you'll have to battle through hordes of them to save her and get out alive. Gone is the fixed camera angles and tank controls, replaced with a simple third-person system that favours action and precise shooting. Resi 4 is just brilliant. The action, sense of survival, puzzles and story are all top notch, and it's just a perfect action game. Gamers expected a lot from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and they perhaps got even more than they was expecting. You play as CJ Johnson, returning home following the death of his mother and are quickly drawn back into a life of crime. You fight, rob and steal across the state of San Andreas through a story filled with corruption, betrayal and death. In addition, you can buy clothes, change your hairstyle, your fighting style, gain fat or muscle and more. For an open world action game, there really is nothing else you need. Compounding this, Rockstar brought their A game with the world building, with constant jokes plastered around the world, on the radio stations and more. Gamers just could not get enough. It turns out that there was more Rockstar could get out of open world action games. In Red Dead Redemption 2, you play as Arthur Morgan, a member of the Van der Linde gang, as you roam the Old West, completing missions or just exploring. Featuring a massive world with a big variety of different landscapes and environments, Rockstar crafted something truly spectacular. You are able to control your place in this world, as you can act as a straight criminal or vigilante, help people or hinder them. The choices are yours, and this follows through with the story having multiple endings, each with deep emotional impact, depending on the way you played the game. The level of detail, the amount of things you can do, created a new landmark for open world games. Just when you thought RPGs couldn't get any bigger and better, along comes Baldur's Gate 3. Originally released in early access in 2020, with its full version coming in 2023, Baldur's Gate 3 takes players on a journey as someone infected by an elithid tadpole that will transform them into a mind flayer. You decide to fight back against this destiny, and along with your companions, go on an adventure to change it. What makes Baldur's Gate 3 so amazing is the sheer amount of choice it gives to the player. It plays out like a proper Dungeons & Dragons adventure, with all the decisions and branching paths that gives. The complex intertwining stories and relationships with the characters only add to that depth, and the impact the player can have on the world is truly important. For a long time coming, when people think of the word RPG, they will think of Baldur's Gate 3. It's difficult to put exactly into words what makes Persona 5 so special. Originally released in 2016, with an updated version released in 2019, Persona 5 sees you take on the role of a young male high school student in Tokyo who has been unfairly charged with a crime. You have to take control of his daily activities, from going to school, going out with friends, working at the cafe and more. As the game progresses, you discover a place called the Metaverse, which contains demons known as shadows, manifestations of people's inner emotions and evils. Some people are so twisted that they have entire palaces built around them in this realm, and you and your friends can invade these palaces, remove their evil desires and cause them to repent. This is somewhat of a simplification of the story, but at its heart, Persona 5 is about what makes people good or evil, and how we hold people accountable for their actions. It doesn't shy away from difficult subject matters, and over the course of the game, a story unfolds which is as heartbreaking as it is uplifting. The interactions with the people you encounter, though, is what makes the series so impactful and difficult for many to let go. When Final Fantasy VI released in 1994, it redefined what a Final Fantasy game could be. Square utilised everything they had learned in their history to craft one of the greatest role-playing games ever, mastering their craft in pixelised form. Set in a steampunk world, you play as a group of different characters invariably oppressed by the brutal empire, which combines ancient magic with machinery to create twisted magitech weapons. These characters consist of the likes of Terra, a young girl who has spent most of her life as a brainwashed slave with magic only recently freed, Locke, a treasure hunter and rebel, Edgar, a king of a small nation, and many more. Each of these characters and the others that you meet in the journey feel fleshed out and feel important. The graphics and music are simply supreme, with the little Super Nintendo managing to produce an orchestral score that vibrates through the ages. You simply get lost in the world and the adventure. From Software has slowly been building up its reputation over the years as a development powerhouse, putting out great game after great game. In 2022, they released the culmination of all of this work with Elden Ring. Elden Ring is a third-person action game in which you play as a custom character dropped into the lands between, a ruined world over which several demigods rule. Your job is to repair the Elden Ring and take the mantle of Elden Lord yourself, should you want to. The game is hard, very hard, and that is part of the appeal. Every battle could be deadly, and this means you need to prepare well. The vastness of the world means it has many secrets, many hidden enemies and treasures, and through none of it is your hand held. You are simply free to do as you choose. You can try and beat the hardest enemies right out of the gate if you want, it's up to you. This freedom in discovery, along with the challenging combat, results in a game that is just fantastic. All of Link's adventures have one thing in common: they feel epic. Which one of them is the best is largely down to personal opinion, and there's no right answer. For me though, it is A Link to the Past. Firstly, the graphics are just beautiful. They've been designed to perfectly take advantage of what a 16-bit system can do, and because of this, they're simply timeless. Secondly, the music is outstanding, with the Super Nintendo sound chip bringing the classic themes to life in all its glory. But what makes A Link to the Past so special is the world itself. Whilst it's not the biggest world in the series by any means, it's the one that uses its space the best. Every single screen seems to have some kind of secret, every area something different to do and explore, every dungeon and puzzle perfectly designed. There's no extraneous fluff, no walking to different points for the sake of it. It's compact, but still retains that epic sense of adventure. Not to mention that later in the game, the whole world changes when players encounter the Dark World, giving even more things to see and do. There is just nothing wasted in this game, and that's what makes it practically perfect. When Super Mario Odyssey came out in 2017, it had a lot to live up to. Mario hadn't been in a big adventure in some time, and this time around, they gave him the biggest. Bowser has captured Peach and plans to marry her, and Mario teams up with Cappy, a hat that lets him perform new moves and possess other creatures and objects. For me, Odyssey is just the perfect Mario game. It features a large world with loads of different levels, each one unique, and within those levels are more sub-levels, missions, secrets and more. The fun of Mario games has always been in the platforming, and this one just absolutely nails it. It's the most fun that controlling Mario has ever been. There is just so much inventiveness in each of the levels, and they all have different mechanics, new things to do. It's just constantly fresh and unique. This is the game that for me just exemplifies the concept of fun more than any other. How can one game be so addictive, so frustrating and yet so rewarding? Originally created in 1985 for the Soviet Electronica 60, the game is really simple. Every few seconds a block will appear in one of a handful of shapes, which you then have to place at the bottom of the screen. If you can get a full line, those blocks disappear. If you reach the top of the screen, then you lose. It's so simple, yet so addicting. Anyone can understand it, and it utilises the core puzzle solving abilities we all have. There's no tricks, nothing to figure out, just decide where best to place each piece. Since Tetris was originally created, it has been basically constantly available on almost every system, and that's because it's now become universal, synonymous with gaming itself. You can't have a salad without lettuce, and you can't have games without Tetris. You are Solid Snake. Your mission? To infiltrate Shadow Moses, a nuclear weapons disposal facility. It has been taken over by a rogue, genetically enhanced Special Forces unit, codenamed Foxhound, who are threatening the world with nuclear strikes if their demands are not met. Metal Gear Solid is a stealth action game in which the main idea is to avoid detection and combat. You do this by monitoring radar, hiding under things, in vents or in boxes, taking enemies out silently, disabling cameras and alarms, and more. Along the way, you're in contact with your support team over codec calls, and it's through these calls that a lot of the story is told. The game mixes themes of geopolitics, genetic engineering and morality to create an experience that is more than a simple action game. The atmosphere of Shadow Moses matches the cold Alaskan setting, and this, along with its deeply compelling story and narrative, the excellent stealth gameplay, great music and effects, results in a gaming masterpiece.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
Samus Aran, the galactic bounty hunter, has been called. A space station has been attacked. Upon reaching the station, Samus finds the scientist dead, and the Metroid lava is stolen by Ridley, leader of the space pirates. Samus follows Ridley to the planet Zebes and begins her battle. Super Metroid is just perfect. Everything from the progression to the controls, the secrets, the graphics, the music and the atmosphere, there is just no way to improve on any of it. The large interconnected world just works. You never feel as if you are hitting a dead end, and there is so much to explore and uncover. Each environment, enemy and boss feels perfectly designed to give a challenge but never feel unfair. The world itself just feels so alien, and the lack of any dialogue throughout the main game lets the players come up with their own story. It really gives the feeling of someone fighting alone through a hostile world, and the game knows how to utilise this feeling well, giving moments of complete silence when even the music stops to really enhance that effect. I cannot find any flaws with Super Metroid, and to me that makes it the best game of all time.